I couldn't resist using Jan Richardson's poem for today's service as we gather for the first time in person with the backdrop of a raging pandemic and the upcoming sale of our beloved church home on Oakley Drive. We certainly find ourselves in between. Many of you have heard us speak about liminality. Liminality is the space between, when you've let go of something, but you don't yet know what will come next. For those of us connected to this congregation, the unknown is exponentially greater than for those at other congregations who remain in place. No one really knows what post-pandemic church is going to look like, particularly for the medium and small churches, which across the board are struggling with religious education, funding, membership, and burnout of staff and volunteers. No one has that crystal ball and can see what lies ahead. Instead, we get to live into the unpredictable and unknown future together. Jan writes, when you come to the place between, when you have left what you hold most dear, when you're traveling towards the life you know not, when you arrive on the hardest ground, may it become for you a place to rest. Our small but mighty congregation continues with today as an important step towards our future. But we're hardly at rest, since we continue to hold Sunday services, music rehearsals, bi-weekly coffee houses, Sunday morning storytelling on Zoom, and 7 small groups that meet monthly, ranging from book groups to a mom's group to a gathering for people who live alone. But we have come to one place of rest in one regard. We have put to rest the question of will we stay or leave our Oakley Street building, and that is monumental. We know that we're letting go so that we can gather in a place like this that is fully accessible and large enough that we can be together in this space and still feel safe. Kind of extraordinary. I don't minimize putting to rest that huge decision. I've not had an opportunity to hear from all of you, but those I have spoken to seem to feel very at peace with the decision to sell, especially since over the past years, we have found a way to Zoom in order to hold this faith community together and connected online. Jan writes, may it become for you a place to dream. The space between becomes a place to dream. We've dreamed together over the years. We've imagined ourselves in different locations. We've imagined ourselves with expanded ministries and with newcomers who visit and stay and change us by being here. I wonder if we will be freer to dream in a time of no assumptions and flux. The staff and leaders of this congregation speak of this being a time to experiment, a time to turn to imagination on how we might gather to explore other places and ways to be together. Shared places, public places, homes, getting all of us out and into the community in new ways. I hope it will be a time for us to explore together, to come to know ourselves as a community rooted in Unitarian Universalism and our mission and our values and our vision of mindful interdependence, authentic curiosity, and courageous love. Jan says, may the pain that has pressed itself into you give way to vision and knowing. It really has been a painful time. Kids aren't able to go to school. As Lori talked about, some kids are in quarantine. I know a number of you parents have had kids who've had to stay home. Parents are feeling stressed beyond their beliefs. Work environments have evaporated into home offices, and meetings have happened now through screens. We've all had to assess if it's safe to see our family members outside of our home or friends. So many of us are struggling with what to do as we see our democracy and our environment in crisis. Decision fatigue is real, and it takes conscious action to move from despair to connection and hope. I believe it is particularly important in times like this to be part of a faith community, that a faith community is essential. It gives people access to others who have decided to live, to work for a better world and better self, to come together instead of remaining apart. As I returned last week from California and hopped into last Saturday's coffee house and then joined you in worship last week as member of the tech team, I came away with such clarity and warmth in regards to the graciousness and the joy and the care and the curiosity present in this congregation. I hope you have felt it as well, because there is the truth that by being part of a congregation like this, you have an antidote to the pain and to the divisive climate that is hyped up and fed to us in the daily news. Together, through joys and sorrows, through checking in at the start of meetings or small groups, or gathering at vigils, we come to know deeply, not just rationally, that pain and suffering is universal. We've witnessed that through sharing our stories and opening up to others, we feel less alone. We've come to understand that although our grief and trauma may stay with us for a lifetime or for a long time, it matters and it can lessen some when we know that we are held in love. Transitions, thresholds, periods of liminality are times that are rich with vision and imagination and curiosity and experimentation. So as we make this our way through knowing what is next, we can flourish in this between time. It's time to stretch ourselves, to think outside the box or beyond the walls of our building and come to know ourselves in new ways. Jan finishes her blessing with this: may the morning make of it an altar, a path, a place to begin again. An altar. Strange word sometimes. I've recently been hooked on this book called Fluent in Faith, a Unitarian Universalist Embrace of Religious Language by Jean Harrison Newjar. I'm contemplating how to bring it to the congregation, maybe a sermon series or small groups or a single book read. I find that the way that she names Unitarians, Universalist resistance to religious language on point. She is generous, but firm in her belief that UUs need to be able to speak the language of religion and faith in a way that resonates for us. She believes that language is critical in interfaith circles and can even help us define our connection to Unitarian Universalism in a language of reverence that goes beyond our own principles and sources, which are available online or on a little card at the entrance table. Jean Newjar challenges us to break our traditional religious language out of our past limitations, to breathe metaphorical air into those words, and to come to our own understanding of those words. We can go deeper into that someday, but for now, for the sake of today, I think of the word altar used by Jan in her blessing. When I hear the word altar, I can take it away from the Catholic Church altars I saw in my childhood, instead think of an altar in a larger sense. I think of altar as a sacred place, protected and respected, where things of meaning, symbolic or otherwise, are displayed. An altar for me is a place that grounds you in what matters, and it helps remind you of yourself. I have friends who have created altars so that when they meditate or rest before them, take time before their altars, they are called into their higher selves. So, what if our in-between time in this congregation was held as sacred time and in such care as an altar? There's no doubt that it will take us on a journey, since we have already begun the most extraordinary journey of living through a pandemic, while the world changes rapidly in some ways and way, way too slowly in others. We are beginning again today, beginning with the invitation to be together in person, while knowing that it may be some time before the majority of us do so. I think those of you who have heard me speak know that It's taken me longer than I thought it would to come to understand a congregation of this size. I see Cynthia sitting there who was at White Bear. I mean, I have been in congregations that have always been 800 or more people. In a society that often equates more with better, it's easy to compare and think that we are less than the large congregations, which have an array of programs and social action groups and opportunities, where Sunday services come off like professional level performances that are viewed by an audience, where there are religious education rooms full of children of all ages, and where 2 to 3 services are offered each week. But what I've come to know over the past 6 years, is that what makes small congregations unique is how real that example of the strings of lights really is. I actually who said it was messy? I think it was Ali, right? I think about you and the unique way you shine are seen in a small congregation. It's easier to bump into people more than once, to come to know each other's names, to know at least a few details about each other's lives, to understand each other's lives and struggles and concerns and even beliefs. The connective distance between congregants isn't as far. The access to ministers and staff is more readily available. The likelihood that we will all know the names of your kids or other beloveds in your life, be they partners, parents, or those you've loved and lost, or even each other's pets' names, is much higher. The opportunity to make an impact on your own life and the lives of others feels more immediate as well. A small congregation is a ripe environment to practice your faith in connection to each other. Although we struggle with proactive congregational care, outreach, and consistent action in justice, people here do kind things for one another and are committed to serving our community partners as if they were old friends, always stepping up, remaining consistent with time or funding, and finding meaning and gladness in the act of giving to others. We've been able to shift our worship upon the advice of those who were teaching us about being online. We've shortened our sermons and added time for reflection. This is different than what was called talkbacks in the past, which were more of a question and answer session with the preacher or the speaker. What I and others have seen happening online prior to today is you grappling with what is being shared or lifted up in services. It's enabled us who attend services to get to know one another better, to hear each other as we check in to our hearts and our spirits and our minds. So I want to express my sincere gratitude for the way you hold all of the parts of this service when there's time to share. These are just some of the gifts of being part of a small congregation. So you and I chose to be here online or in person this morning. I have to say I struggled with the in-person mightily, but it's lovely to see all of you. There is something about these people and this faith that has called all of us and keeps us coming back. We'll continue to be a community that celebrates and actively examines faith, that challenges one another with loving kindness to be our best selves and works for a flourishing world. All of our values are best expressed when shared and strengthened in community, when we're that messy wad of lights that shines brighter and is more dynamic and vital. In this time in between, which has no clear end, we will discover more about who we are and what we are called to be in the future. I urge you to lean into love, into trust, into kindness and hope and compassion and courage and care. Allow this to be a time where you grow your curiosity and generosity, where you say yes when you can and no when that voice inside tells you not to do so. Tells you to do so. Know that you, each of you, is a beloved part of this community and that you are interconnected in this community with love like a glue. Fred Muir, who's a UU minister who challenged our churches to take a serious look at ourselves and how easy it is to be lulled into worshiping individualism and exceptionalism. He believes that in order for our congregations to survive, we have to go from being an I church, not the I, but individual I church, focused on our individual selves, and embrace being a we church. A church that centers beloved community which claims its spiritual and religious identity and is built on the promise of mutual trust and support. So here we go, y'all. New beginning, the embrace of between time, and the mystery of not knowing what is next. So as we move into a time of discussion, I'm curious about, we're going to do just briefly because it's already late, about today for you. And whether you are here in person or online, today is a shift towards what will be happening in the foreseeable future. As I mentioned earlier, we will work to create a space here that more intentionally reflects us, while acknowledging that without storage on site, we're going to be mindful of what we bring with us. So what are you thinking today in terms of your own ability to embrace this new phase of between time? And how do you think your UU beliefs inform how you're showing up? Does anybody have anything you'd like to share? It's a quiet bunch today. Anybody online, or is it quiet online? It's fine if it's quiet. Tom, I think you maybe come up. Or are you getting the mic? Amy's getting the mic. Here we go.
I just thought it was interesting that the first day that we're back together, we had an accident, which shows that there are some advantages to doing the Zoom meetings that we hadn't thought of in the Minnesota winters.
So true, Tom. Beth.
I wanted to do this before, but I wasn't fast enough, or maybe wasn't courageous enough. I like to say we're the most remarkable occurrence of life on this planet. We're the most remarkable, caring, thinking creatures. And we came up against this feisty little enemy that we've been fighting. And but in our caring, we wanted to be together. In our thinking, we figured out how. And what I wanted to do before was interrupt when you finished listing everybody and start applauding to say thanks. Because a lot went into this, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you, Beth. Let's give a round of applause. It's true. And thank you for acknowledging that, because it does seem like, there's rough spots today, right? And yet, oh my goodness, the amount of work these guys have put in, it's beautiful. So thank you all. And it's nice to see all of you on screen. That's kind of a treat. I hadn't stood here and looked back, so. Lynn.
To follow up on what Tom said, yes, it is true. Marie's accident was it felt like a very difficult way to start, but it also showed what a caring community this is, as people gathered around her, kept checking in with her, and did everything to make sure that she was safe and okay. And I think that that's a huge part of what this community does. So thank you to Kathy and Dana and everybody who's taking care of Marie.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, nobody gets to sit in the back of the pews and suffer alone, huh? Once they come and fallen. Is that it? Would anybody online like to share before we close up this part?
There are some comments in chat. I don't know if I'm on the audio that the congregation in person can hear yet.
Or
We are, okay. So what I see in chat so far, Jesse Leffler says, I find myself wishing I could be there in person, but also glad that it's still possible to join you even though I'm so far away. Mel Wynn says, the new space looks good. I am also glad to be able to do this from home given the weather and COVID concerns. Jan Vassar says, thank you to the band, singers, and tech team. And Carol Whitman says, in truth, we are in a liminal space all the time, every day, moving from the before to the next thing. And I don't see anybody else waiting to share online.
thank you all. So our closing hymn is number 6, Just As Long As I Have Breath. I love that you all in the band are playing along. Thank you. It's just an awfully joyful addition. Just like we have before, we'll have the hymn leaders sing. People at home will be muted and can sing along as loud as you'd like. And those of us who are here in person will hum along. I assure you, when it is safe to sing again, we will get those words larger and we will sing together once again.